Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this evening. I'm really glad to share an evening with you, share my knowledge, and also listen to your needs as we go along. So my name is Doris Edwards. I've been running a company in Geneva for many more years than you care to know, since 1980, in fact. I have a lot of clients, multinational clients, but I have moved into a new adventure as of 2009, and this is why I'm talking to you today. This new adventure and a new website is So You Want to Change, right? So what we're going to talk about today is disruption. It's a story about disruption. And what you will find here is that I have mixed together two elements that at first glance are not really, one wouldn't really mix together. One is SAP. SAP is a really big company. I'll introduce it to you in a minute. And the lean startup methodology. So why have I mixed these two things together? Well, over the many years that I've run my company, always in the technology transfer area, obviously you can imagine that since 1980 when I started it, things have changed. And in fact, one has to adapt. And one of the big problems I've had is that sometimes I didn't do the right thing. And I have come across the lean startup methodology maybe 5-6 years ago, and it really is something that I can recommend. I'm a big fan of it. Lean startup has been a sort of a minority sport for many years. It comes from Silicon Valley. But since this year, 2013, it's sort of, if you like, been blessed by the Harvard Business Review. You mentioned it before. And it's actually something that bigger companies are also using. I will introduce you into this methodology in a few minutes as we go along. Now, SAP is this big company, and just like me, they've had ups and downs. And a few years ago, they really were in trouble. And what I have observed is that they have actually used, knowingly or not knowingly, this lean startup methodology to help them come back again into the market. So I thought it'd be a good idea to mix these two and talk to you about successful transformation. Yeah? And that's what we're going to do over the coming few minutes. So there we go. Let me just very briefly introduce the Geneva Lean Startup Group. Now, I founded this group in May 2012, and as you can see, we are now 366 members, 366 smart people, as I call them. It's a lively community, and basically it's about how we can learn more quickly what works and what doesn't. The target public for this group is young or older entrepreneurs, people who have an idea, who say, I'd like to start my business and don't quite know how to go about it. Yeah? But increasingly, we also get people from the big companies who come to listen to us because, as I said, the Harvard Business Review is now sort of blessing it as something really good. So what do? We organize evenings. It's a meetup. And we usually do 90 minutes of, well, there's networking before and after, and during these 90 minutes we have an interactive session. So basically there's somebody who talks about one aspect of the lean startup, takes one element. We give you the theory, and then people sit together in groups and actually work concretely on an issue and walk away with 3 or 4 really concrete ideas with regards to their business or the business they would like to start. So here you can see some titles of what we've done over the past few months. We usually have between 15 to 30 people who attend every time. I'm also blogging for a private bank here in Geneva, Lombard-Odier. Lombard-Odier are interesting because they are also, in a way, doing lean startup. What they really do is they're trying to disrupt their existing business model. So they have started a few years ago, now 3 or 4 years ago, this emerging platform. And the target public here is independent fortune wealth management companies. So smaller companies, one also calls them family offices, who manage the money for sort of a small group of investors. There are many. This emerging platform is worldwide. They have now over, I think, 2,000 little companies who are regularly coming onto the site. They get content and they get also networking, online networking. And I'm writing, in fact, for them once a month under the series. The series is called The Secret Innovation Lab. And it's, yes? Is it open to the public? Yeah, you can go on it anytime. I can give you the link. This is a great opportunity to also help, a very conservative industry that is finance, to help them think about what is the business model that's going to come, and are they going to be disrupted? Can they continue as they do? And this is the reason why I was hired to write these articles here. So if you look just here, part 1 of 12, so I'm doing this over a year, is envision and craft innovative business models in a conservative industry. And that is straight into lean startup methodology. Another article I published 3 months ago was in fact what we are going to talk about here as well, which is why your business needs to meet its customers online and what we can learn from SAP, right? From this very old German company that has done this disruption. So we're going to look at that. And this is the reason, in fact, why I created this course, why I had this idea of mixing lean startup with SAP. So where does SAP and lean meet? Well, they meet, if you like, by the way they measure things, because both SAP and lean say when you start any project, be it digital marketing, be it content marketing, be it creating a company, before you go and do a lot of things, you have to build an idea, you have to build something, you have to set measurement criteria, you have to measure, and you have to learn, and you have to reiterate many times until you get it right. Because you can't just read what you should do in a book, yeah? And this idea of reiteration, as you will see, is of course a lean startup principle, but SAP has applied it in a very smart way. I'm in full admiration of the company, of how they have done that. But before we look at SAP, let's just look at lean. I'm throwing at you 3 or 4 sort of taglines. They're just taglines, but they give you a good idea. A new venture is a journey of search, rather than of execution. What small companies, startups often do is they immediately want to execute because they have an idea. They want to go and do it. But in fact, you should not do that. You should first search. Who is my target public? What do they need? Is my product really a good fit? And so on. Before even getting a website up, before buying a logo, before doing all these wonderful things. And it sounds very, yeah, of course, everybody does that. But often this doesn't happen. People run much too quickly into execution. Also, lean startup is about how we can learn more quickly what works and what doesn't. This has to be done quickly, because when you are a startup company, or even if you are P&G, say, if you're a big company and you're launching a new product, you don't have that much money, you don't have that much time. So a methodology, an approach that can help you find out more quickly what works and what doesn't will also help you save money. And for a small company, that can be a question of life and death. Yeah. because if you, for example, you leave your job, you want to create a company, you have saved for 6 months, it's got to work within 6 months. Otherwise, you're going to have to take another job. And if you don't do things right, you will lose a lot of time. And this is one of the reasons why I've created this meetup, because it's a really great way to encourage people to be entrepreneurs, but to go into it with their eyes open. Another one I really liked is that, to research is not just to sort of think, well, I think, and look at a few websites and go a little bit into Google and see what there might be. It is really formalized. If you do a search, if you look at a product market fit for an idea you have and the client that might be out there, it's not just sort of doing it by thinking or by dreaming. It's really, as it says here, it's poking and prying with a purpose. And again, this is something that people sometimes forget to do. So we come back to this original logo, the build, measure, learn, feedback loop. This is really what Lean Startup is all about. So let's just introduce some of the players here, because I recommend that you buy some of these books or at least download a few documents that I recommend to you here. So on the top here is one of my heroes. I have never met this guy, but I really love this guy. He's called Steve Blank. He's probably about 55 now. He's one of those, he didn't go to the big universities, but he's a serial entrepreneur. He's Silicon Valley based, of course, but he has created at least 3 or 4 companies that he has then sold on. So he's a rich man now. And he teaches at Stanford University. And basically, Lean Startup, he has initiated it first. And as he's a bit older, he will still remember, in fact, he'll remember the car industry in the 1960s when the Japanese wanted to create cars like the Americans did. And they came up with this just-in-time model because the Japanese couldn't afford having all the stock for all the cars in their factories, as Ford had. They didn't have the money. So in fact, they needed a process where they could say, we only need the pieces to make that car when we have the order for the car. That was just in time. And then later on, there's something that's still used today, which is agile programming. Agile programming is the idea that you don't spend 6 months programming something and then you show it to your client and he says, I don't like that and that doesn't work. Agile program is about making little bits, testing it out with the client, going back, and you will remember the logo that we just had before. It's reiteration. It's reiterate and learn. Yeah. So he's my hero. And then there are 2 young guys, and they are sort of, if you like, he is the godfather. He sponsors these 2 young guys. Young guys, they are 35 now. There is Eric Ries. Eric Ries was also an entrepreneur who failed several times. And you know, at the time, maybe 3-4 years ago, when somebody failed, even in the States, you didn't sort of broadcast it to the world. And he actually started a blog, and he was talking about failure. And he was really, that was a very popular blog. And from there, through Steve Blank, he wrote this book, which I actually have here. And it's called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Right? And this has really made a big, big impact, first, as I said, in Silicon Valley. Yeah? And as you can see, I have put up to Steve Blank there, read HBR May 2013 article, which is entitled Why the Lean Startup Changes Everything. But this is very new. Before we had Eric Ries, who was sort of a bit, as I said already, a minority sport. And then, very proud, I have to say, we have Alex Osterwalder, whom you perhaps know also. Now, Alex Osterwalder is Swiss. He did his PhD together with his boss, if you like, who is Professor Yves Pigneur at the University in Lausanne. And Alex did his PhD on business models, really. And as he said quite rightly, when he had finished his PhD, the only person that would read his PhD would be his mother, possibly his father and his professor. That's usually what happens with PhDs. But he had some connections, and especially Steve Blank, for some reason, had read it, and he felt that was just what was needed to complement this methodology. And to cut a long story short, we have today the Business Model Generation book, which you have probably as well, which is a completely crazy way of doing a business book. That was in itself, that the adventure of the publication was in itself very innovative. And this book I, again, highly recommend to anybody who is launching a business. Really essential. Okay, and then last but not least, there's the Geneva Lean Startup Group, and we are really trying to evangelize this whole idea in this particular locality here. There are over 100 communities worldwide. We are actually listed on the official Eric Ries site, so that's also how we get people to find us. Okay, so I say here passionate entrepreneurs, but there might be some amongst you here who are not entrepreneurs, but who come from big companies. So this goes for people who are really starting off a business and are passionate, and I hope you who are in the big companies, you're passionate as well about your job. So as I already mentioned, what tends to happen is that we tend to fall in love with our product or service. Here we have thought about it, and everybody is just waiting for that. It's going to work. I know it's going to work, right? So this is a natural thing, and in a way, it's good that this should happen. And then what often happens is we say, right, we have this good idea. Now I'm going to build it, yeah? And you go down in the basement. You don't see your girlfriend anymore, you hardly eat, you hardly shower, and you spend the next 6 months creating this perfect product or service. It's really, really good. People say, what's happening to her or him? We don't see her anymore. You're doing that. Finally comes the day. It's finished. It's perfect. And you come up and you want to take it to the market, and what do you think might happen? Quite often what happens is that nobody wants it. There is no market traction. And people say, well, but that wouldn't happen to me. I could tell you a very recent story, 3-4 years old, with Hewlett-Packard, where exactly that happened. They had lost millions on a sort of iPad they wanted to create that didn't take. Maybe they were too early, maybe their product wasn't right, but they have lost millions because maybe they fell in love with their product a little bit too early. So that's not what we should do. What we should really do, and this is Steve Blank, who says it all the time, is you have to get out of the building. This is one of the jargon. It comes in the book, it comes everywhere. Get out of the building and find out, as it says here, whether what you imagine, what your reality is actually something that people want. Yeah, and whether that reality out there is matching the plan we have. So, in another sort of jargon of lean startup, what basically it means is you have to test your hypothesis by talking to real people. What I'm not saying here is that you buy a market study or you go again onto Google and you find out how many percentages might just love your product. That is one thing you can do, but it'll never give you the reality you need to test. What you really need to do is to talk to people. And this is, we call that customer discovery interviews, and there is a certain art to it. And in our lean startup meetups, we actually help people practice these customer discovery interviews, and we give them roadmaps how to do that. Yeah? So this is one of the big elements at the beginning. And then what happens is often, so you have this idea of a product and you go and talk to somebody, you we usually say invite them for a coffee if you can really talk locally with people. Don't just go to their offices and ask them a few questions, but really try and find the world view of these people. What are the needs? What are their pains? What are they suffering? And could your product or service really help? And it's not just a question of doing that once or twice. The idea is really that you get 20, 30, 50 interviews. The more interviews you have, the broader your base, and the more these numbers will talk to you. Yeah. So understand the needs of your potential customers. And what often happens is that you think they want A, but in fact, as they talk to you, they don't want A, but they might just want B. And B is something just a little bit different from what you thought you were doing. Yeah? And so you understand the needs and pains and you reiterate. You do it again and again until you've really understood a problem. And only at that stage, do you then start building your product. So what we really push also in our meetups is the customer persona technique. It's not just about market segments and customer segments. It's really the idea is that you have this persona, this person who has a name, yeah, that you know, like if it was a friend, if he or she was a friend, and you know their habits, you know when they get up in the morning, what newspapers they read, how many children they might have, all this, and in fact, these are archetypes that you describe. And by doing that, you can then start, for example, digital marketing. Because, today we are all so overwhelmed with information we get. If we can't provide our customers the information we know they need because they have that pain, they will no longer read it. It will just go into spam. So we have to be very, very targeted and understand their needs. And this is the subject of what we're going to do interactively in about 20 minutes or so in a group. You're going to be sitting in a group and you're going to develop your customer personas and then share this information with your colleagues. So let's now assume that you have found a pain, a customer pain, and you say, yes, there is really something in it. At that stage, you start to build your service or product. And what we call it, in fact, in this lean startup jargon is a minimum viable product. Remember I showed you the down in the basement thing where people go for 6 months? Don't do that. Just build the minimum that clients could use. And I know this is difficult sometimes because we all want to do this perfect thing. We want to please clients absolutely. But at this stage, you will spend much too much time and money building something perfect. It's just got to be good enough. And then what you have to do is you have to go out and try and sell it. Because, people who say to you, yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, Doris, yeah, I like that. You say, would you buy it? Yeah, I would buy it. But then when you actually ask them to buy it, will they buy it? And that is the proof, because a yes, I like it, a Facebook like is not going to bring you a customer, right? There has to be the next step. And that often needs a lot of courage, because that's where really the crux of the matter lies. You might have 500 Facebook likes, but nobody buys your product. Your business, therefore, is not viable. So the minimum viable product, that's what it is. It's the simplest version of the product or service that allows you to begin this process of learning. So I remember the guy who created BlackBerry. They are unfortunately no longer doing so well now, but he had an idea before he created the BlackBerry, and he had lost a lot of money because he had gone down into the basement. And when he had the idea with the BlackBerry, what he did was he got himself a piece of wood. He's a Canadian, and he had this idea of a machine that you could put in your shirt pocket. Today this sounds normal, but at the time it was really revolutionary. It would have cost him a lot of money to create it. So he took this piece of wood that he shaped, and he put little buttons on, and he took some colored pens, put these things, the buttons on it, and then he went to some meetings. And when people say, "When can I see you, John, next time?" he would take this thing out and say, "Let me just see, I'll have a look." And people said, "You mean to say, oh yeah, this is synchronized with my Outlook or my email account?" And he said, "Wow, can I have one of those too?" And he says, "Well, we are just building it right now, but I gladly take your, it'll cost about so and so much." And he saw there was traction, but he hadn't built it yet. But that's one way of doing a minimum product. And then obviously he probably didn't make the top product to start with, but he did have traction, right? Minimal viable product. And if your campaign fails, you never have to build the real product. So, just a lot of text, but to finish this part off, it's not just failing fast, it's failing well. So, the fundamental idea really is to treat everything you do as an experiment. And again, that goes for you also who are in big companies, because when you have just a department who needs to start something new, it's relevant for that too. And you should always test a hypothesis, right? So what you do is you set it up such that you learn and you reiterate. As I already said, lean startup principles are based on lean manufacturing. And this was a management philosophy that was adapted to today's service culture mainly also, so lean startup. And you have this famous feedback loop: build, measure, and learn. And you want to do that as quickly as possible.
So I just have one question.
Yeah.
So if we assume that we create this minimal viable product and we show it to the public to gain traction, to gain feedback, isn't it a little bit risky, that the competition can be also over there, they could see what we are doing, and then they could just copy our idea?
This is often a concern that people have. The risk is there, but you are moving very fast. And I think the idea that you would have somebody who would be just waiting to copy everything and do it quicker is relatively small. I think it's not just the product usually that makes you a business, it's all that's around it. It's how you sell it, it's your service, it's the personality of your company. Sometimes it's relevant, say, for a very high-level specialized product, for example, in a medical domain or in a high-technology domain where you really have something, then you would want to consider maybe to even patent it before you go out at all. But for most services, I don't think the worry is that big. Yeah. On the whole, this is often a discussion in Lean Startup, because there are also these Lean Startup weekends that people organize, where within a weekend you come up with a product and a whole business model, and people say, "Well, I don't want to do that because he can pick my ideas and all that." But in reality, in fact, it doesn't happen often. So I think you probably have to evaluate in which business you're in, but I would say it's not a big concern based on the experience we have with that. So now let's look at SAP. Now SAP, it's a completely different view. Now SAP is one of the world's largest enterprises, and what they really sell is software. They sell software packages. They sell whole systems and processes for really big companies to manage their accounting, their human resources, their sales processes. They're huge, complicated systems. And SAP, I looked it up what it stands for, because that's probably, I thought you were going to ask that. First of all, it was created by people from IBM in Germany in 1972, so they were Germans. And it's called something very non-exciting, Systeme, Änderungen und Produkte. So basically, systems, applications, and products. So it wasn't a really sexy name, but that was what it was. They have today over 61,000 employees. They're headquartered still in Germany. They operate in more than 130 countries. They are an extremely solid company, a little bit like, the Mercedes in Germany. Heavy, good quality, solid. That's the branding they had for many years. So why did I take SAP as a case study? Well, first of all, because they needed, I will explain that in a minute, a fast transition. They transitioned very, very fast within 3 years. They are still at it now, but they have really succeeded. And they induced a mindset shift whereby the measuring was key to their success. And that's where we join it together with the lean startup. So they were a highly traditional, conservative, closed sort of company. They have become, within 3 years, something completely different. They are innovative. They're absolutely amazing at digital marketing. They're very accessible. You can find information very quickly on your mobile, on your computer. It's really, they have a great blog. I can only recommend you go and see that, not necessarily because of the product, but because of the way they do things. And also, one of the things with SAP is that they used to be selling these products that were, worth 1 million francs. A company had to pay 1 million francs for an SAP system. So, of course, a decision for such a purchase would be done at the very highest level, be done by the chief information officer, who then needed to convince his chief finance officer and the CEO, of course, as well. So they would sort of come in there, beautiful shirts, a bit like IBM, and say, we know what's good for you. You need this. And that would be done over, a bit of champagne and a bit of whatever. And you would really work, as we call it, in the C-suite, in the top level suite. So you can imagine that their salespeople had a certain profile as well and a certain way of working. But they had to change that. You will see why, because things happened and they had to completely change their approach to be customer-centric. And the measurement model shift, last but not least, there was a revolution in there, because in most companies, and including SAP, I don't know how it is, for example, in PAG, is that marketing has a target. Marketing has to serve sales. It has to bring about a certain condition so that the sale can take place. But what SAP have done is they have taken that all away, and in fact, marketing is tied to a business outcome. It's tied to the achievement. So, for example, at the end of the year, they will say, we have spent $100,000 on marketing, and through that, we have had a conversion of whatever, 60% into clients. And of course, it's not only marketing that converts, but it's mainly sales that converts, the salespeople. And so it used to be that sales and marketing wouldn't sort of work together very much. Well, here they were told by top management, you only get a bonus if you have such and such a conversion. And you can imagine it wasn't liked first, because a marketing guy would say, well, I can't control what John, the salesman's doing, so he might be throwing away my bonus for the end of the year. No, but that wasn't the case anymore. So it was really admirable how they changed that whole mindset to be more successful. So in fact, why did they have a problem? Well, in 2008, not really only their fault, we had the financial crisis, meltdown. People you remember some companies went bust, many went bust. Well, those big companies were the ones that used to traditionally buy these big systems from SAP. So their sales went down for that. But it wasn't only that, it was that they had a disruption that came very, very quickly. Because what they had sold at the beginning was, in fact, software that needed special servers to run on. And the service was very expensive and very difficult to run, and very complex. And came new players such as Salesforce. I don't know whether you've heard of Salesforce. Salesforce is a cloud-based system that helps you manage your client processes. Yeah, it helps you find clients, it helps you invoice, it's a customer relationship management system. And the idea was that you wouldn't have any more hardware or software in your premises. They would do that all for you with a distant server, and you would just rent the service. So, for example, Salesforce, they're not cheap, but you can, for $150 per user and per month, you can have sort of more or less the services that SAP would have offered you. And as you can imagine, that was new, and it came very quickly, and they realized that there was a disruption in the industry. Disruption is like what happens now with newspapers. Yeah, there's a disruption. Disruption happens all the time. Or what Amazon did to the book industry. So that was a big problem, and then they had also some bad management, which was there. And that resulted in 2008 in a minus 2% performance, which was du jamais vu. SAP had always been in 2-figure growth rates and profits. In 2009, it got worse, and by the end of 2009, they were at 8%. And that was a disaster because SAP is a very German, a very socially responsible company, and they had to actually lay off 3,000 people. And that was very, very hard for them. And so one of the 4 owners, who was an older man by then, he came back, and actually he fired the CEO and got some new people in, and they changed it around. So that's what happened. 2 CEOs. Again, I've read up on these people because I've seen the content that SAP produces, and I was so impressed. And so I really got into reading up about this company, and they are amazing, these 2. So they had actually 2 co-CEOs, which often happen apparently at SAP. Wasn't the only time that they did it then. And what they needed to do immediately was, they needed some new products to counter the Salesforce guys that had disrupted them. They bought at several billions some companies that went into the direction of their competition. So they acquired products. They realized that they had for too long sort of talked down to their clients, we know what's good for you and SAP, so they had to change that. As I already said, sales and marketing needed to work as a team. And what happened here was that as the new product acquisitions, they had services and products that were actually cheaper. And that meant that there was a whole new generation of buyers that they needed to talk to. And these buyers, if you get a division head or you get a smaller department head, they tend to be a bit more techy. They are not the CEOs. And they also are much more informed. So they realized, in fact, that often their salesmen knew less about the product than these informed buyers did. So there was a whole need to actually reshape, retrain the sales team so that they would talk in a different way, in a more customer-centric way to their buyers. And marketing, as I had already mentioned, they were made to work as a team. And especially the idea that marketing was really tied to business outcomes changed. But for this all to happen, you have to experiment, measure, and reiterate. So, what better way to show you what they actually had done is to listen to an interview with Sean Burns, who is the digital marketing, worldwide vice president for digital marketing. This was a sort of a 50-minute interview. If you're interested, I can send you the link. But here it's only 4 minutes. I've just taken out sort of what I felt was the main gist of what we are talking tonight. And what I really like the subject is that they got these 27% more incremental sales leads by doing some things right. I've explained you some of the background, but here we get much more concrete. So if you're in agreement, I'll start I hope you can hear it okay. It's an American English, and the loudspeaker is a little bit badly balanced. So I speak good English, but I had a little bit of problems understanding it, but
Let's talk about the results. Your goal is to convert more online traffic to leads across SAP integrated marketing portfolio. So how's it going so far, John?
Well, first of all, I think you've got a summary there of the last number of years we've been at it. So what's so interesting about testing at the scale that we're doing it is we consistently see incremental sales leads coming into the funnel. So that's sort of the great we did job number one. What's more interesting about this is that we're saving budget simultaneously. So anyone who's putting our analytic horsepower, whether it's testing on site, whether it's testing in search copy, whether it's media testing, whether it's optimizing the way to do a registration form, we actually realized that we found at SAP online, we really are able to do more for less, which is pretty amazing at scale and has a big impact on the organization.
So there's some beautiful marketing efficiency there. Those are some power numbers, but from all those tests you've run, can you give us a sense of which tests are most effective for you?
Yeah, let's talk through this because this is really interesting. There's definitely some B2B marketers out there. We obviously live and die in the B2B space. We have a long sales cycle. Our goal is always to generate a lead, and ideally a hot lead to pass for our sales organization and have them eventually convert into a revenue relationship with SAP. So where do we start? Well, not surprisingly, if you go far left, we start with registration forms. On SAP.com, in our campaigns, from search campaigns, from online media, all moment of truth is a registration form. It's when we're asking a prospect to identify themselves and to take the next step with SAP, either requesting a bit of marketing cloud, requesting a sales appointment, requesting an online check. It's a huge moment of truth for us in the B2B space. And we start the testing there, and immediately, and this is also a story about doing no testing, right? If you start from zero and you do no testing, you immediately see pretty dramatic lists, and you can see the list in terms of just registration and form focus. So then you step up, and we start to play around with design and layout. What's the layout of the page? How many boxes? How much content do we show? And of course, the element that everybody likes, which is the pretty pictures. The colors we use, the colors on the buttons, the imagery, the graphics, on and on. So all of a sudden, you start to see even better lists. But then you get into what for us was an aha moment. And this was a year and a half in, because to be fair, you can test. You can do an immense amount of testing in just registration environment, in just design and layout, and squeeze a lot of juice from that optimization over. But when you go to content and offers, something blows away. Of course, with rep panels, you're trying to scale. So I'll call the numbers. We're seeing up to 7 to 8 times conversion improvement when we test content and offers. And, we've all heard content is king. I've probably said it a million times myself. All of a sudden in our live environment, we realize just how important it is. Because if the content is more relevant, if the content is personal, if the offer is directly connected to the email or the search string that the person is coming from, and we're testing that with A/B, we see dramatically more listing conversion. And now we focus most of our tests. And the marketers come to the SAP test lab and they want to test this, we drive them into content and offers. Again, we do that, but it's actually our preference because we get the most accurate about that.
Now, is that what you were thinking going in, that content and offers would be such a difference against other tests?
Yeah, absolutely not. You know content is important, you know offers are important, but in the web environment, design and layout is equally critical, and registration form is what drives all this crazy. I'm sure even people that registered for this webinar had 2 or 3 comments about the reg form could be better. We always do. So I didn't think this realized how powerful this could be until we started to run, a large number of really just see how impactful this particular one is.
Up. Here we have a little problem.
Let's talk about the results. Your goal is to convert more online traffic to leads across SAP.
I think it's... Sorry about that.
You mentioned a new, more analytical skill set you brought in to dedicated web analytics. What do you envision as the future skill set?
That's
of marketers?
not the right
More of a
one.
hybrid?
It was previous slide. And previous slide one more time. How do I get to the previous slides? Well, maybe I can do it that way, huh? With the, that one, yeah. So for some reason here it doesn't want to advance anymore, and yet it's actually in my,
Let's talk about the results. Your goal is to convert more online
So what I
traffic
suggest is that we are not listening to it to the end right now. I can send you the link. It's an extremely interesting thing as you listen to it a bit more, but maybe it's better to listen with headphones.
How's it going?
Basically, what comes out of this is the three really takeaways from this is you've got to determine what you want to measure, first of all. What is it? What do I want to measure, for example? I have a registration form, it's up there, I have 1 month, and I'd like to have 60 sign-ups within 1 month. You were talking about your cosmetics product. You'd say, I will set up a registration form for a specific customer persona, and I will see whether I get 60 sign-ups within 1 month. You test, and if you don't get 60 sign-ups per month, the idea is not to say, it doesn't really matter, I'll give it another month or something. You go back and you say, why is it that I didn't get those 60? Is my product not the right fit for the customer personas? Or is my sign-up form not very well done? It can be as simple as just the text of the button to sign up. Is it that I'm on the wrong media? Maybe you're on Facebook, but maybe your customer personas should be on LinkedIn. So you test, you find out, and you start again. And this is what they do all the time. They really, really test everything out all the time. And he explains in that interview a little bit more how they do that. And it's really, I thought it was fascinating and impressive how they actually do it. And the numbers that they have are amazing. They get so many more clients that way. Anyway, there's there's just 1 minute, and I wanted to show you that if there is anybody in here who's a marketing specialist, because what you find in many big companies is that people don't like to do analysis. You know, we all like to make logos, just like those logos here. We like to design really cool landing pages. And when it comes to analysis, we do that on Friday afternoon just before we go home. It's not as interesting as all that. And yet it's that makes SAP successful. And it's also that makes your company successful through lean startup. You have to be able to measure what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just sort of walking around and wasting time. So what he's talking about here is what kind of people SAP hires to do these kind of tests. And I thought it was rather interesting. So if it works.
You more analytical skill set you brought in to dedicated web analytics. What do you envision as the future skill set of marketers? More of a hybrid or distinctly creative or analytical?
Well, interesting. I'm always, I spend enough time with design people and enough time with analytical people. I don't think we're ever going to invent a hybrid person. It's just not going to happen. But what I do see happening, which is very encouraging, is the analytical people love great design. And we work with a number of people who literally used to run regression models in the financial services industry. And the reason they're doing testing in a marketing center at SAP is designers we work with are asking for insight. They're not asking for focus groups, they're asking for quantitative insight. They want to look at the insight book, they want to look at the web data, they want to talk to the customers, and they're using much more analytical input to inform the design. And I think that's only going to accelerate. We're going to see more analytically interested designers and more creatively curious analysts, if I could say that.
What do you think about that? You've been in marketing. Do you agree with what he says?
And basically, I think that we should always start from market research before we go into market. So,
yeah. Well, what he basically says is that the person that is a really great designer and an analyst at the same time, that person still has to be invented. But the best idea is to have an analyst who likes design and a designer who knows that analysis is necessary. Yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting.
now I'm just wondering, let's say, across these two videos. So you know, you made the first point when you spoke about these 3 points, like what we should do before launching a product. And I'm just thinking, you know, so what is the best method to estimate the target? Because you said, okay, let's say that she has 60 cosmetics to sell per month. This is her target.
Yeah.
But let's say in February she sold only 40.
Yeah.
And there could be different reasons for that. So we can analyze. But before that, you know, like how we can know that this is the right level, because some people can be more optimistic, they can say I can do 80, then they can say 30. What is the right method to do estimation?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons to find that out is by having gotten out of the building beforehand and having talked to clients, and also, of course, understanding the market you are in. So, for example, if you are in cosmetics, you will have said, well, my cosmetics will be, you know, for women over 40, between 40 and 50, in of a certain income level, yeah? And you could then have talked maybe to 50 or 60 women like this, and you see some traction, and based on that, when you actually then create, for example, a first landing page, where you say to that you address to these women, you could say that given the population and given what I heard, given the traction that I saw, I think I should have a minimum of 100. If I don't get 100, I can't live. Yeah, I think it's a little bit, but it's a good question, because I think doing analysis like that in itself is an art. It's an art to actually set your measurement criteria. Yeah, that's quite true.
Companies like Procter & Gamble have no problem with engaging 60 consumers to the market research. But if you are a small startup, you cannot do that. So.
Yeah. But often what happens with startups is that they give themselves measurements that are too low because they want it to work. They are passionate about their product, and therefore they put it too low. And they actually, in a way, cheat themselves. So what we say in the Lean Startup Group is that what you should really have is a mentor. You should have somebody who hasn't got your passion, but who understands the market that you talk to, and this person will sort of keep you on the straight and narrow and say, well, Doris, you know, you're saying you need 30 over the months, and then when you have that, you say, great, I'm going to go now and spend my 100,000 francs and do my product. I think you should go for 60. Oh, you know, you might not get there. And then you should say, why didn't I get those 60? Because I should really. And try again. Yeah, but it's very true. This is an extremely, and I think, you know, big marketing companies like P&G, they have a lot of experience, they have a lot of staff, they have a lot of history also behind it, so that they can deduct. And even then, sometimes they get it wrong. Yeah. So, fine. So this is my last slide now. I've gone through SAP. Obviously, there are some really good case studies. It tells you all the history. They have, amongst other, 5 global objectives that they set themselves. You know, when it went down in 2008, and then they got these 2 new CEOs in, they set 5 global objectives. And the one I have just pulled out because it's in relation with Lean Startup is they wanted to humanize the brand and develop pull marketing, because as we said, you know, SAP, it was the guys who says, we know what you need and we tell you. And they realized with that disruption that came with cheaper products and more advised, more competent buyers, that didn't work anymore. So that was one thing they did. It was helping sales sell and helping the audiences buy. And guess what? This goes through content. And if you want to create content, well, what do you need? What is it you need before everything? Well, you need to understand who your customer is. Because when you create articles, when you create offers, you need to understand what the pain of your customer is. And that's what they did. They did a lot of that. Looking at their new buyers. What kind of things did they need? They were buyers who knew about processes. They knew about software products. So it was no longer about just telling them, buy our wonderful stuff, it's the best. It was to give comparisons. It was to give case studies. It was to show why they should still stay with SAP. It was generally giving customer-centric information. Same with cosmetics. There are many, many cosmetics out there. If you just say mine is the best because it's Swiss and it's got this name and all that, you might not get so far. But if you could say have a blog article, or you could have a video, or you could have a case study or a testimonial of somebody who could say, this is the product that really changed my life because now I have no longer any buttons. And this is how I did it, and so on, then people will listen to you. Yeah? And if you talk about getting rid of buttons, well, obviously you will target your whole landing page and your search engine marketing and everything on people who have that particular affliction. But first you have to find out who these people are, what their age is, where they're coming from, and so on. So this is what we do with customer personas, right? And that's what we're going to do now. So what I suggest, I have prepared here for you.
Sorry, just before that, I just was thinking, so you said that between 2010, 2013, SAP, they did revolution, as I just understood, in digital marketing. So does it go only about the content marketing, that they adapted it more to their customers, or is there anything else that they did within digital marketing?
Well, within the pull marketing is they have done a huge effort on content marketing. If you go on their blog, you will see, and another interesting thing they do is, for example, they talk a lot about innovation, a lot about startups. They don't just talk about their services, but content marketing is a whole idea where you don't just push forward what you sell, but by understanding your clients' pains, you give them information that is useful. And what they found was, as their products became somewhat cheaper, they are now also selling a lot of products in the cloud, is that their clients changed, and one of the pains they have is, starting maybe even a new department. So another interesting thing is that 50% of the contributors to the SAP blog are actually clients themselves. So what they do is they engage their clients to actually write about their experiences. In return, of course, these clients get exposure, and their blogs are sort of read every day by 50, 60,000 people. So, you're not only a client who is writing something, but you actually have a voice. And by engaging clients to write on their blogs, guess what? They listen very carefully. And the feedbacks that the clients give is then used again to improve their products and their processes.
What kind of platform are they using?
Well, actually, one of the things is that this video that you just saw is not just done because he didn't have anything else to do. Indirectly, it also pushes their own product because they actually developed their own customer relationship management system to track clients. Because as he said, you unfortunately didn't hear it very well, but when you have somebody who's coming into your sales funnel at the very beginning and writes that first, gives you the email address for a chat, somebody to call, or for a newsletter, or for an ebook, or for a video, that is the very first contact. Yeah? And once you are in their system, they track you as an individual as what else you request, what you do. And then they send you information, they market to you for your very needs. So it's obviously much more sophisticated than what a startup would do. And that needs systems. There are quite a few systems out there, but they have actually created that platform. Okay. As far as the blog is, you just go on to SAP, sap.com. And then they have about 5 different blogs, each of which is managed by some sort of vice president, so they really have pushed that very high up. And each blog is extremely lively, and you usually see the success of content marketing by the number of people who share. Yeah? They have a lot of shares, they have a lot of comments. And they have 5 different blogs. Well, why? Because they have probably at least 5 different customer personas, if not more. Yeah. So I think the comparison stops with what I have given. Obviously, a startup is not as complicated as SAP is. SAP is very complicated. But I'd really go, their innovation blog is really good. Excellent.
And from the social media world, are they active?
They are, yeah. They are active, less on Facebook, of course, given their customer personas, but they are active on LinkedIn. They are very active on Twitter. They're very active on Twitter, and I guess they're moving now. I haven't actually followed them on there, but Google Plus would also be sort of their customer persona who would go there. One of the things that he says very clearly, and I always say very clearly, is, the social media platforms, it's like if you go to an exposition for a day and you have a stand and you give a lot of information out and you feel, wow, I've done really well. That is not sufficient. You have to drive people back to your real website. You've got to ensure that people sign up, that they come to your website, they come to your blogs, and that you have the relationship there. You can do that also, for example, on Facebook by saying, right, if you want to get a newsletter, you have to sign up, and the sign up actually happens via your site. Don't develop customers on Facebook without getting anything out of it. Because if Facebook one day decides that your cosmetic product is, irregular or hurting one of their rules, they can shut you down from one moment to the other. So it's not wise to use social media to actually capture clients. It's wise to capture them, to attract their attention. But if you want to have a continuous relationship, you have to bring them back into your own systems at all times. That's very important. So yes, they are very active on social media, and what you can see is, as I say, you go into some of those blog posts and you just see how many shares they have. Twitter shares, and so on, and how many comments also there are. I always find that the comments, it's perhaps also a cultural thing. I think the Americans, and of course a lot of it is American-based, they're big client, they have a big market there as well. People who are lively, who are really engaging with a brand or a company and say what they think and take the time, that is usually a sign that there's something they're doing right. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting actually because it's a B2B business, the one and usually this kind of businesses not think about Facebook,
exactly,
not think too much about Twitter.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see some best practices.
Yeah,
in this area.
Yeah.
It's different business than Nestle or Procter & Gamble.
Well, I mean, if you look, right. Although there are 2 or 3 others that are really going in this direction. One, a very interesting one is actually some banks who are also starting to engage clients through content marketing. One of them I've just recently discovered is Credit Suisse, actually, who have a new site called The Financialist. Have you heard of that? thefinancialist.com. And basically it's a magazine about lifestyle and financial investment. And when you go on it, you will see the customer persona already by the tone. And I can assure you she doesn't look like that. And you see whom they're talking to. And whom they're talking to is the professional. It's not the rich aristocrat, but it's the professional businessman, the man who travels a lot, the one who is educated, the one who has enough money to take his wife for a weekend to Moscow to see an art exhibition. So they're talking about this kind of thing. They're not saying invest with us and do that. But every now and then when you read, of course, the investment is part. It's all about customer. It's about building. And there again, surprisingly, even for a financial industry, there's a lot going on sharing. Yeah, they do a lot on video as well.
I'm a client of UBS, so usually I'm getting this kind of information by mail. They're just sending it to send it to the mailbox, and it's about traveling, it's about this, what you said, the things. Yeah. But this is a new way of doing it, so by providing the right content to the people. Yeah. Yeah. How do they reach? Do you know how do they reach the customers?
How do they reach the customers?
Yeah, to go to this site, because furthermore, we haven't heard about it. So, what is the way to attract people to the site?
Well, if I look at the Financialist, I think, well, first of all, they hire to run these sites. They actually hire journalists, of whom there are now many on the market, because this is also a very interesting thing, is that newspapers all go bust. Many go bust. Therefore, you have a lot of journalists on the market. But in fact, what these companies do is they recreate journals, but within their space. So to answer your question, I think some of the clients, some of the visitors they get is quite simply by publishing a lot, organically also, so that people sort of fall on it when they have an interest. I mean, basically, if you imagine you have this art exhibition with this wonderful new artist in Moscow, and you place the SEO right, and you probably find that an art lover will fall onto this and say, wow, there's some other stuff there that's interesting too, and then stay. I don't think it's just by conversing with their existing clientele. Yeah, but that again brings you back to whom do you want to attract? Yeah, and then of course more down your street there is I thought that was an ingenious way, was P&G with their Man of the House. Do you know that site? That's P&G. The analysis there is, if you look at the Metro Man, I hope you have a boyfriend who is a Metro Man. The Metro Man is the man who is usually married or lives with a woman who herself is professional, has a full-time job, has a managerial position, maybe they have 2 children. He is the one who will perhaps say, oh yeah, little Fritzli is sick, I have to, run home and get him from the creche. He is the one who will organize a birthday party for his young son. But he doesn't know really how to cook and make all these pancakes and things, but his wife is traveling. So this website at P&G, Aston, was called Man of the House, is really addressed to that kind of man. So they're talking about how to organize a baseball game at home for, children when your son has a birthday. They tell you basic cooking skills. They also go a little bit into sex, into, how you can make your wife happy who's just come home from a business trip. All sorts of things. And their sites, they get a lot of readership. It's really like a magazine. And when you look at the very bottom, it says this is sponsored by P&G. And, you know the products better than I do. Obviously, there is some product placement at some time, but there's no advertising. It's not buy this, buy that, and the other. But the product placement is just woven into content that is useful to that person. So it's something that marketing agencies are only getting to grips with sort of slowly, and it's not an easy thing to do, because you have to really understand what clients you want to market to, and creating great content, video, articles, interviews is expensive. It's true, and you have to do it over a long period of time. It's not something that gives you an immediate return. And this brings us back to this guy, the vice president there. I mean, he says in the video it took him 1.5 to 2 years to just, figure out what kind of registration forms would be the ones that give them the best return. Right. So basically what we will do now is you put yourself into groups. I will help you do that. And then here you have some information about customer personas. This is just something you can take away and reread again, I would recommend. So what is a customer persona? And then on the second page, I give you a filled-in customer persona. And it's very important that this customer persona should have a name and, if possible, a face. Because if you're several in a company, what you want to be able to say to your colleague, let's assume you are a little bit a bigger company and you have a customer support department and you have a sales department, a marketing department. If you can say to your sales support, look, I have on the phone right now a John executive who wants some information or needs some help, then if you have figured that out yourself, you will know what kind of a person that is, and you'll be able to respond to him in a certain way. So customer personas are really things that you share in the whole company. They are archetype clients, and they are given here in a sort of a story kind of way, where you describe this John executive. This is a real case for a family office, a financial office, and this John executive is a typical case. It's a typical client of a wealth management, a small wealth management company. Because if you read a little bit more, you'll find that he has moved here from France with his family. He has 5 children in the international school. And he is now very, very concerned about the fiscality in France and what might happen, whether he has done something wrong and what happens to his money. And guess what? That particular company, small company, their speciality is helping people like John find a way to become legal or not to get into trouble with their money. So obviously they are targeting this kind of person very clearly. And you can see, there's much more than just the basics of a customer segment. It's actually a description of the person.
This persona in the organization, because as far as I understood the business, I used to work a little bit on SAP a long time ago, and as I understood, the clients or customers are actually these organizations and not one person. So how does it apply, this, for example, this scheme to the organization where we are targeting, for example, specific kind of industry?
Well, if I understood you, basically in marketing you have already got market segments, right? You have this huge thing, but a market segment, you always will have that. So the market segment here would be generally wealthy people. yeah, for example, could be.
These are consumers as far as
They
I
are
understand.
consumers, yeah.
Right, and I speak more like SAP, like when they are providing these software solutions, financial solutions. So as far as maybe it changed, but when I was using it, they were targeting organizations like big companies.
They're targeting organizations, but in an organization, you're targeting a buyer.
Yes.
Yeah, and they will have customer personas for specific products they have, and they will know where to target, who has the decision power, for example. Who can, they will have a customer persona, as you can see behind. I mean, one of the really big questions to ask is, where does this person sit in the hierarchy? Who is his boss? How much money can he spend? When can he no longer? Where does his budget authority end? Right. And all that. And of course, when you are in business to business, you will not want to talk to a customer persona that only can spend $50,000 when your product costs $100,000. So it's, with companies, there is always a person you talk to. But it doesn't mean to say that you don't have customer segments anymore. This, in a way, is a subset. It's a subset, that customer persona, because when we didn't have digital marketing, when we didn't have online social media, this was less important. But today we want to reach these people with social media, with content. And they will not read content that doesn't interest them. Yeah? This is why this is so important.
So we are kind of, it's a new way of approaching the organization when we are doing it less, let's say, in the professional way and more in the private way.
Exactly. Well, exactly. I think there is a mix. For example, if you take this customer persona here, who has his children in a private school, let's say he has them in the international school in Geneva, there is no reason why that company in their blog shouldn't have a whole series about which are the best private schools in Geneva, because that kind of person will be interested in that. It has nothing to do with wealth management as such, but it's something that will help that person. And it's interesting to think about that in your cosmetic thing. What is it, for example, if you have creams for young ladies between, say, 14 and 18 who have these problems with acne, right? They might also be interested in clothes, for example, or they might be interested in music. So you might want to actually create content for them. They say, wow, this is a great site. I've learned something, which has nothing to do as such with that cream you're selling, but which attracts people to your site. So this is sort of the idea. Yeah. So anyway, this is an example. And then you have sort of just a suggestion of how you would fill that in. And to finish, I give you here an empty template, which you can use. And the idea really is that now that you are sitting in tables, I give you here photos of people, just any. So the idea would be you take your glue, you take the photos, you choose a customer persona that is hopefully in your area. Yeah, you all have ideas about a business. You glue them already here, and you give that customer persona a name. For example, it could be Mary Widow. If I was a wealth management, Mary Widow is the woman who was married to a guy who worked at SAP, who was never at home, but who made lots of money, and he died of a heart attack last year, and she has all that money now, and she doesn't know how to invest. And she's not really very keen on finances. Her grandmother tells her, oh, you have to go to John, because we've always done our banking with him, but maybe she doesn't like John. You see? So how could you get Mary Widow to be interested in your services? Yeah? Maybe Mary Widow spends a lot of time on Facebook. So perhaps you would say, no, you know, wealth management and Facebook doesn't go together, but maybe with that particular customer persona, Facebook is where you want to be. Yeah? So this is the idea, you do that, and so I would say we spend, maybe you are 3 in a group now, so spend maybe 10 minutes filling that in. I would of course recommend to you know, elaborate on it when you leave this room. 10 minutes, and then you spend 5 minutes each explaining that customer persona to your colleague. And what you will find, your colleagues, I hope so, will play the game and help you and say, wow, I think that maybe this customer persona would also be interested in that, or I can't really see that customer persona at all. Just try and have an interaction and help each other creating this first customer persona. What we'll do then at the end is I will give you 5 minutes warning, so in 20 minutes time, and then we'll go back. I have no more slides, but I'd be very interested in having a discussion and your feedback, and also you tell me what was good about presentation, maybe what could be done better, and how you generally feel about this. Do you agree? Is that okay? So, thank you very much, and we'll see each other. I will sort of around if you have any questions, of course, I'll come and see you.